and preserving the programs that we know exist as opposed to just creating new ones. I think we will be able to create new ones. It's just going to be a matter of making sure we have really, really clear champions and we can make the case. And again, that's where that coalition building comes from. So we actually want our neighbors having the same story. We want them having to share why this is important for them. And we want neighbors across the country having to share it too, because it will emphasize for the members of Congress the importance of needing that support.
Short on local water supplies and long on regulatory requirements? Do a deep dive with us by listening to the Full Circle podcast. Learn how Las Virgenes Municipal Water District and the Triunfo Water and Sanitation District are meeting 21st century water supply challenges for a portion of the Los Angeles and Ventura County regions.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Full Circle podcast. I am a special host. You probably haven't seen me before. My name is Steven Baird, and I'm here with LVMWD. And I'm here to welcome a very special guest, Ana Schwab from our lobbyist, BB&K. That's Best in Krieger. And she's going to share a little bit about their role supporting Las Virgenes-Triunfo and the JPA as we kind of, I would say, work our way toward the end goal of the Pure Water Project and all of the different challenges and opportunities that lends itself. So Ana, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got involved in water.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for having me. I have been involved in water, I would say, for almost 8 years now since I joined Best in Krieger. And prior to that, I worked on Capitol Hill for a couple members of Congress. I worked on congressional campaigns. And then I left the Hill and I was working on a number of different issues. And I kind of came into water because someone believed in me. I was given the opportunity to join Best in Krieger, and a gentleman named John Freshman, who the district worked with when I originally came in 2017, partnered with him. And John encouraged me to join Best in Krieger, learn water. He said, you know the Hill, you know the administration, we can all learn water. And we did. And it's been an incredible experience, one that's been a lot of fun, learned a lot, gotten to work on a lot of really great, important issues. And one of the really fun things for me and being here today, especially, is Pure Water is one of the projects I've gotten to work on from the very beginning. So it's been really cool.
How, when you say, as somebody who's coming, you obviously probably working for representatives, you become a little bit of a generalist, right? You kind of have to know everything that is really impacting that particular representative's constituents. Whereas once you kind of delve into water is so impactful across so many different industries. What was kind of your, it makes me think of like, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time. So where did you start on where you really felt like these are the basics I need to know about water and water policy that's going to allow me to really kind of excel in this new position?
It starts with maps. I'm a very visual person, so maps made a lot of sense to me. And John and I would sit for hours and look at the different maps of California's water systems and looking at, what is the State Water Project? How does the Colorado come in? What is the CVP? Where do we have the different interconnections already? What are the water districts? Who are the parties?
Right.
And just by visually seeing it, you just got to start, as you said, one bite at a time. Mm-hmm. You have to know what animal you're looking at, right? And the animal here was California's water. It's a big animal we're trying to all figure out, and every day trying to, make better. And we're trying to add and create new systems and create systems that are going to last. And so you have to know what you're working with.
Yeah, it's, we talk a lot because we are so California centric and how many water agencies there are in California. And then, I'm involved in the Aqua Communications Committee, and you sit down and you start talking through issues and you realize that even though it's only 3 hours away, the difference between Las Virgenes and a water district that serves Bakersfield, mm-hmm. The problems are so different, even though we're still dealing with a supply issue, right? And it really makes me think kind of like this whole idea of like the marble cake of federalism. So we have all these disparate kind of parts with different interests all under the federal government, and that's where you're kind of, advocating for. How does the federal government really influence California as far as reactionary policy, or what I would say even like is proactive stuff. Like I would say in a lot of ways California is being more proactive, or some states are, when it comes to maximum contaminant limits of certain constituents of concern. How does that trickle down from the federal level down to this California and eventually Las Virgenes?
So that's a great question. And I would take one step back, right? Like, let's look at the big picture of it. When you look at how the federal government really can get involved, sometimes they can have real direct impacts, and sometimes it's, here's an informational item we're going to provide, and then what do the states do with it, right? So as going with our water, the trickle down effect, if you would, right? And there are also going to be areas where the feds are going to set rules, as you said, the maximum contaminant levels. There have been instances with PFAS, for instance, where the feds are setting limits that we don't even have in the states yet. And so how do the states then react, including California? And so there's different measures that they take upon themselves in the states to either protect those provisions and or change them without being contrary to, and following what they need to for the EPA. I'd say that the biggest things we see from the federal level into California and then directly into LVMWD is different regulations and operational needs, right? So we know that the Bureau of Reclamation in the Department of Interior has operational role on the Colorado River and is a part of those negotiations as well as decisions in terms of any Colorado agreement. Now, it's not necessarily that they own the water, but they're operating, the Lake Mead, Lake Powell, and so how they can do different things, they need to know what water's in there. And so that impacts what's coming into California, of course. Then we also look at, for instance, the Army Corps of Engineers, who operates the different reservoirs, mostly for flood control. But even at those levels, the flood control measures that they're taking impact how much water is coming into the systems. And so we always look at, Oroville is a great example where state, feds partner. We have an Army Corps of Engineers partnership there. And depending on how much water is coming down, also then depends on how much water ends up here, right? Because we know we're directly impacted from the water in the State Water Project. And so all of those kind of, again, that trickle down effect of the impacts.
Right. And that, one of the things that I was thinking about it when this whole kind of, we have flood control that's really done by the Army Corps of Engineers, but we have local flood control districts, which then are interacting with a different federal agency. And then obviously we're very familiar with the Bureau of Reclamation because they've given us money, which we very much appreciate. Thank you. And these are all agencies at the agency level. So you're kind of creating these relationships and advocating there, but also there is the role of you interacting with the elected representative, right? And where do those meet? Like, is it when we're looking to get money, do you start at the representative and have them help, I would say, advocate or, improve our case to the regulatory agency? Or do we wait until the regulatory agency gives us one way or the other and we say, well, we're going to go tell on you, hey, they're not giving us the money? Like, how does that work? Because I feel like that they're so intertwined, but yet it's so hard to really understand, like, how we got that check.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't ever really want to tell on people. We really try not to do that part. We save that for the in case of emergencies, but we haven't needed to, right? Because we have seen for LVMWD incredible partnerships from the federal agencies and your congressional delegation. And we've seen your congressional delegation spearhead and become really big, standard bearers for California water, and in doing so as well for LVMWD, for the Pure Water Project, and for the goals that you all are setting out there. But I'd say it's kind of like when we talked about looking at the map, right? We never just go to one party and say, hey, we're going to go for this funding. Will you help us? We want to make sure that both the agency and our congressional delegation know what's going on. First and foremost, what's the project, right? Who is LVMWD? What is the project we're going for? Why is it needed? Right. And I'll never forget at the height of the drought when LVMWD was having to utilize the flow restrictors, we would bring those to meetings to just help emphasize, here is the full impact, right? This is what we're having to deal with right now because drought is such an issue. And because drought's such an issue, we're pursuing this project. We're pursuing Pure Water because we want to make sure we can have additional, new water supplies where we can. And so it's really making sure everybody knows about the project, understands the why of the project, and it gets them excited and want to be partners with us. And we've, as you said, been really fortunate to see partnership with the Bureau of Reclamation. We are continuing to work with the US EPA as well. And those wouldn't be possible without our congressional delegation also supporting us.
Right. So it's we talk in, I do outreach, and we talk about, there's always the question, it's like, oh, should we do social media or email or this? And it's like, well, the answer is yes. That was to everything. The reality is resources is what that makes you choose. But for your organization, it brings up the question, like, so you're a water expert, but does your organization then employ like energy experts? And so as maybe, when we think about desalination projects and the resources needed statewide to make some of these things happen, do you bring in other experts who then can come in and talk to the delegations about, hey, this is also why water is important to energy infrastructure and why we need these projects that are going to support these clean water projects, Do you guys have like a big team that you can bring in? Is that how kind of like BBK is set up, or are you like, you are a water expert and that's like what you kind of, your North Star?
So I'd say we have a lot of expertise in water. Best and Krieger as a firm has a lot of background and expertise in water as well. But as a firm, we also have a really broad background in a lot of other things too. We do have energy experts. We have land use experts, like you name it. And I have colleagues we can call on. In our government affairs team, it's really unique too, because we learn a lot. And I know that may sound a little silly, but we learn what our clients are needing us to learn, and then also kind of trying to foreshadow too what are going to be the issues. So energy is a great example where these projects are not possible without energy, right? Right now, getting water to LVMWD comes from 400 miles away, and that's a high energy cost. If we can be getting some of our water more locally, possibly, right? And that's what pure water is going to give us, but we want to be energy efficient about it, because we also know that energy usage is something we have to be really mindful of, just like water.
Right.
And so it's something that we're able to parallel together. And when we get into like the expertise of different licensing and things that come with energy, we bring in our colleagues.
Right.
But I'd also say that when we bring, LVMWD to town, for instance, the best experts in the room to talk about the issues is going to be LVMWD.
Right.
And at that point, BBK gets to be supporting you all, because you all have a team of experts taking, information at each of these points, highlighting them, and able to really explain the real world examples. And we then also get to learn from you. So when we're back in Washington, D.C., advocating on your behalf when you all aren't there, we're able to share those similar stories as well. But the best stories and the best information and the most direct come when LVMWD gets to be up there and share their voice.
Yeah, and that's the importance of access, though, right? And that's in a lot of ways what any lobbyist firm does is to get our issue or our concerns to the ears and eyes of those who can make the decisions to help. And that's an access thing. So I would say people who are more maybe into politics, it seems like if we have a bit of a whipsaw seesaw thing where leadership, whether it be the House or the Senate, it can change in every midterm election or cycle, and that brings with it all of the transition in the government, new committee chairs, and all of these things change. How do you, as building relationships, but also your organization, I mean, is it like an NBA draft room where you basically have these big boards and you're like, okay, trying to figure out where everybody is going to end up and how that's going to impact your clients, right? And if, what representatives are going to be backbenched or like coming to prominence. How much of that takes up your guys' time now? Because it seems like every 2 years we're getting these such big shifts, and then with that can come shifts in policy.
So I like the idea of a big whiteboard, kind of making a draft from that. I'm going to take that for next time. But there's some predictions we can definitely do, right? You know who the top players are on the team, you know where they're going to go, and you have some good ideas. There are always going to be a few surprises, especially in elections, right? When you expect certain people to win and they just get an upset and they don't. And so that changes your leadership structure a bit as well. That happens, right? That is part of our system that we have. Fortunately, we have been able to maintain relationships across the board, not just with committee leadership and Senate and House leadership, but with members as well who may not serve on leadership roles, but are of value and importance because of the areas they serve or the committees that they're on, making sure that they know what's going on, but also that their staff knows what's going on, because you never know where a staffer is going to end up as well, right? Staff move from time to time too, even if their members don't lose. And so knowing where they go, then you have that relationship, not just with the member of Congress, but also with their staffer. And so we look at the elections changing. You do have changes in policy, but we know, especially in water, it's one of these really unique areas where we can predict most of the time what's going to happen when it comes to water. Everybody can agree clean access, clean water, access to water is really important. People understand the impacts of drought. There's, more and more, not just in California, understanding impacts of dry weather, making, and wildfires. We just saw one happen in Long Island too, right? So we're seeing this more nationwide. And so the issues that we're needing to address for LVMWD, for instance, are ones that a lot more people are understanding. And so we're able to transcend party politics and talk about the issues as we need to. Now, how each party wants to address them may be a little different. And that's okay. We're able to do that. We're able to maneuver. And we work with the parties, across the board. It's about making sure the issues are the ones that are addressed.
So we talk about, this evolving state. And I want to circle back because what you did mention is you are considered an expert kind of on PFAS and emerging PFAS regulations. We've talked about it a little bit on some previous episodes. Specifically, we talked about it with some of our engineering team about kind of, as an engineer, how they look to solve this to PFAS problem, remove it. But I think a lot of people were surprised about the actions the EPA took. For an agency like LVMWD, who we're a bit lucky because we're kind of already on a path that is not necessarily meant to deal with PFAS, but at least has the ability to help.
Mm-hmm.
But lots of other smaller agencies don't, and I know that can create a lot of issues for them. How do we kind of bridge those gaps between this EPA, MCL regulation, and then the agency or locality's ability to meet those? And is that something where you are doing more like issue advocacy, or is it more you guys are like telling the story of like, hey, these people, this will make it unaffordable water?
So I'd say it's both. And this is one of those perfect examples where we're also working with coalitions and other parties, because we need the trade associations to also be telling the story of the nationwide impact of this, right? We know the impact of the regulations at home. As you said, engineering has shared the different matters that they're taking under their wing to address PFAS preemptively as well. And we're fortunate that the Pure Water Project is set up in such a way that we'll have pure water, quite literally. But you all as an agency are also taking proactive steps to try to address it by making sure your ratepayers are protected, and that EPA and the congressional committees also understand the impacts that, if we don't have the technology, if we don't have the testing methods, we don't have the disposal methods. It was an interesting route in which EPA took. We know that currently in the new administration, there's litigation that started in the past administration. Mm-hmm. And this administration has requested a stay from the court, which means pausing the litigation for right now, basically allowing the new administration to evaluate the case and figure out what do they want to do to move forward. Mm-hmm. And the court granted it. And so the question now is, what does the new administration's EPA want to do with that litigation? There's certain rules that they can address and things that they can change, but with the MCL specifically, we have some, and we don't need to get into a whole constitutional law class or administrative law class, but we can only change certain aspects of this rule if it's deemed that, the public health aspects were not fully addressed, I guess is the best way to say it. And so that would be a court decision, but now the litigation has stayed. So we're kind of in this limbo period of what's it going to be. We don't know, and we don't know the full effects of when the MCL then, what this administration will do.
So, kind of piggybacking on that a little bit, we don't know exactly what they're going to do, but eventually, right, lots of water agencies are going to have to contend with removing PFAS. Locally we've had some. I think Santa Clarita Valley has opened a facility in Orange County. At that point, it becomes funding, and we're all competing for funding. So what role does the federal funding play in really advancing these advanced water treatment options? Like we're using the reverse osmosis route for us, but there's also other ways to get the PFAS out. But how are agencies going to pursue that funding? And then, there's only so many dollars. What are kind of the rules of engagement and competition when, I'm essentially going to be competing with my neighbors across over the hill for the same dollars to get basically to see who can get the cleaner water? And that's not exactly true, but it's boiling it down, right?
So you all are already competing for dollars, right? So the funding that you all receive from the Bureau of Reclamation, support you're receiving from the Environmental Protection Agency for pure water, those are all competitive grant programs and or competitive loan programs that you all have pursued. And so those, I guess, mechanisms are already in place. We don't have a specific program for federal funding to support PFAS cleanup right now. It can be done through programs such as the SRF, the State Revolving Fund, which comes from EPA and the states. So Clean Water SRF, Drinking Water SRF gets administered by California, but they get some funding from the federal EPA as well. So we don't have our own PFAS cleanup program yet, but we do know that there was prioritization created to address it. There have been a number of proposals to create their own programs, but in the environment, especially today, there's a lot of questions as to what will federal funding look like, and preserving the programs that we know exist as opposed to just creating new ones. I think we will be able to create new ones. It's just going to be a matter of making sure we have really, really clear champions and we can make the case. And again, that's where that coalition building comes from. So we actually want our neighbors having the same story. We want them having to share why this is important for them. And we want neighbors across the country having to share it too, because it will emphasize for the members of Congress the importance of needing that support.
Do you feel in your experience that maybe one of the reasons we have been so fortunate to have outcompeted for some of these dollars is because of the regional impact that our Pure Water project can have? Is that something that these regulatory agencies like the Bureau are really looking at? It's like a project that's going to impact the most people, or are they looking at, well, that's a very serious problem that we'd like to see taken care of? Do they, or is it who can make the prettiest submission with the fanciest papers? Because I feel like one of the things we really try to get to our customers is that, like, the Pure Water project is important because it's so multifaceted for us. It's improving watershed health. It's getting us 30% water. It has the ability to give us access to some groundwater that at this point has been inaccessible to local residents, right? And so we pump that a lot. And I was curious, is that something that like the Bureau is really looking at? And does it change from agency to agency? Like, is the EPA looking at something that's going to get the lead out of the ground, and that's what is important to us? Whereas the Bureau is like, how many people can we get clean water to? And that's what's important to us. And our job is to tell the story where our project solves every problem. So
I'd say it's kind of all of the above, with the caveat of the following. the programs are statutorily created. So Congress is giving the EPA or the Bureau of Reclamation basically the framework that they're expecting these grant programs or loan programs to be. And so some clear expectations are set among those. And then the agencies, when they initially set them up, had some authority to do so. And then when each agency sends out a new notice of funding opportunity, there's always some indication that there's administration priorities also included in there. So that does change administration to administration. What it doesn't change, though, is what the charge from Congress is in terms of what that program is set to achieve. So Title 16, for instance, in which you all have received funding from the Bureau of Reclamation, we're utilizing that for reuse and reclamation, right? So big partner for us with the demonstration facility and now upcoming with the Pure Water project as well in terms of construction. But take the demonstration facility, for instance, right? We know that the impact of that was huge education, not just for the staff, but also for our community to learn about it. And that was something that the Bureau really seemed to understand, by ways that they partnered with us all to do it. Now, it doesn't change, though, if it's clean access to water or this or that. That's really where you have the statutes come in. But the administration goals and what we know, like some of those priority points are in terms of the grants. So the grants do need to be well written. The regional impacts are always important, especially in this, I'd say, environment where we can see that the funding is going to have a wider impact, right? What's that widest influence for good? Well, we know that this regional impact is going to be really important. There's a lot of, keys that come with that. So it really just depends, but I'd say it all is really important.
Yeah, it's like I'm saying with outreach, right? It's like, yes, the answer is always yes. I feel like California is pretty, I would maybe not totally ahead of the game. I know that some other states are maybe a little bit farther with direct potable reuse and direct to distribution. How does that impact pushing back up the chain, right? When California and our agencies are pushing hard, what does that allow you to do now to go to our representatives and help advocate or push for these solutions and these fundings? Or does it become one of those almost catch-22s where as a federal representative, they're looking and saying, well, the state's already so much supporting these water initiatives, maybe this pot of money we can use for something else. And it's almost like, well, yes, but we need it all, but we're getting penalized because the state's a little far ahead.
That's a great question. I think I don't think we're being penalized because the state's far ahead, because I think that we see programs like the Bureau of Reclamation's Title 16 program that are so significant and provided so much support and have really led the way for states to be able to have their own programs as well. And kind of created that certainty and backbone support, if you would, that state programs can run as well, because they won't be alone in this fight. Because we always say every drop of water matters, and it does. And every ounce of support we can also get matters, because we know that these projects are large and the just environment and costs of projects are not going down. And so we need all hands on deck, right? You can't dock the ship without everyone paying attention. And so that's where we are, is we're needing everyone paying attention. And I think we have the support and we have the attention of our delegation, of our federal agencies, and having our support of our state members as well is really critical.
Okay, well, I've enjoyed this conversation immensely. I feel some of my questions were probably more for me than the audience, but I do just want to kind of circle back on a few points and tie this up in a nice bow. This is kind of the, queen for a day. If the agencies that we are engaged with and the government, if you could get them to act on one singular issue that is, whether it's impacting your clients or just from your experience now, the one thing that you see, what would that be?
So I think I would make it, if I were queen for a day and I was able to get the agencies to do anything, it would be to focus on modernizing, I'll take California, for instance, modernizing California's water systems. So we have more storage and conveyance to address the environment we're currently living in, where we need to capture our rainwater and our snowmelt. And we need to protect, as we just said, every ounce of water. Every drop matters. And so we need to modernize our systems. And that will take significant investment by all of us, time and money. And so we need that. And I think if I got a second wish, it would be to really ask them to kind of sit down and look at the regulatory landscape and say, how can we make this consistent? Because there are times where we see the regulatory landscape, doing this political shift back and forth, and it makes it really hard for agencies like LVMWD to pursue and advance projects in a, because we're having to change it sometimes. And that costs us more money. It's not that we're not going to do the project. It's just we have to adjust for whatever that is. So if I had Queen for the Day 2 wishes, those would be mine.
Yeah, it's interesting. I learned through this whole process the money value of time. In finance, you talk about time value of money, but really, like, when you're doing these big projects, the difference between had we gotten funding and started 2 years ago versus today is immense, right? Mm-hmm. And so, as a humble government employee, I understand the bureaucracy and sometimes why, but it's frustrating when simple delays because of a change in opinion at the regulatory level can 6 to 9 months kick you down the road, and now that could be 2 to 3% on inflation even. So it's been really eye-opening on that, and these are big projects, and you have to have this long view, and you have to be able to kind of, I think what one of the gentlemen was saying at Water Reuse in Tampa is like, you have to see beyond the horizon sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's hard when you feel like you're running in mud, But what I would want to say is that we really appreciate all the work that you guys do at BB&K. You definitely support us in our outreach efforts, including coming here and being on the Full Circle podcast. And I just really appreciate you coming and spending some time and enlightening us a little bit about, I don't want to say how the sausage is made because it has a negative connotation, but it really is. It is such a unique process that we couldn't get it done without people like you and an organization like yours. So thank you so much for being here, and thanks everybody again for joining us for the Full Circle podcast. We'll see you next time. Ciao.